We're going to move right into this panel, which is talking about the theme of this year's conference is really pipeline safety and transition and changes. And there's lots of changes happening. Both you heard a lot from Marie-Therese about changes within the agency. There's changes throughout and lots of new mandates coming online. So this panel is really going to try to touch on some of those changes that are happening. And we are going to start off with Alan Mayberry, who Marie-Therese just mentioned has stepped up and has stepped in it maybe, as the acting associate director. So, Alan, I think there you are. Up and down buttons.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back again this year, and I like this October thing. It's nice to be here in the beautiful month of October, but I also appreciate the theme of this year's conference about transition. Certainly, as you heard from the administrator, our agency has undergone a significant transformation in the last year, but we're not alone in that regard. Certainly industry, the public, there are just a lot of things out there that really show that the industry that we oversee, that you're involved in, is in transition. And a lot of things are going on. They're really for the betterment of the industry and for public safety. So very much appreciate the theme this year. What you'll hear, really the flavor of my remarks really augment the administrator's remarks. You'll see some repeat slides just to reinforce the theme of transformation at PHMSA. And I'll get into detail on some of the initiatives that we have in play right now. And I'd be remiss in forgetting to mention that, while a bunch of us are here, we have a whole group of people back at the office in Washington and through our 5 region offices that are keeping things going. And you're going to hear a lot about what we're doing here, but meanwhile, back at the office, people like Nancy White, Rod Dyke, and others are busy in briefings and discussions and moving a lot of the policies that we're talking about here today. So things aren't standing still. There's a lot going on. We have a lot of work to do, and we have an incredible staff that is doing a lot of hard work, even when we're away, to make sure that happens. So much appreciation for those of you who stood back to mind the fort there. Just to kick things off, and realizing that some of you may be new to this conference, perhaps new to your interest in pipeline safety. Just to give you a primer up front of sorts, and the administrator covered this a bit too as far as our organization. We are a mode of transportation within the U.S. Department of Transportation. We're there along with our sister agencies like Big Brother, the FAA, and other agencies like Federal Rail, Federal Motor Carrier, and the like. We were established out of the Natural Gas Pipeline Safety Act of 1968, and our first regulation actually was issued in 1970, the 49 CFR Part 192 that many of you are familiar with, the natural gas pipeline, or the gas pipeline safety regulations. Prior to that time, the states regulated it through a patchwork of oversight in the 50 states. But the statute did direct PHMSA to work with the states, which we do, and we partner with the states in oversight. And we currently have about 52 state partners out there. We regulate directly in 2 states, there's PHMSA in Hawaii and Alaska. But the other 48 states plus Puerto Rico, we have state partners that oversee pipeline safety there. I also wanted to take the opportunity to recognize, Pete, I'm going to put you on the spot, but our state partnership is very important to us, and leading NAPSA, or the National Association of Pipeline Safety Representatives, represented here today, the current chair is Pete Chase, who leads the pipeline safety program in Ohio. So Pete, if you'd step up. But we very much, again, appreciate our partnership with the states. Certainly as we oversee the industry out there, on the federal side, we have about 200 inspection enforcement personnel out there. It's growing, as Marie-Therese had said. We have grown phenomenally. We're basically doubling the size of our agency to increase our oversight and our exposure out there in the field. And then roughly about 330 state inspection enforcement staff. It's just a map of our National National Pipeline Mapping System. The blue represents gas transmission, and the red represents hazardous liquid pipelines. That's about 500,000 miles of the total actually, we just crossed the 2.7 million mile mark. We've been used to saying 2.6 million, but we're going to transition over to 2.7 as we just hit that mark. Whoops, that went backwards. Okay, that just gives you a summary of what's out there. Total just over 2.7 million miles, and as you can see, through our partnership with the states, about 2.1 million, a little more than that, is overseen by the state, the 52 state programs that we have. Let me shift gears here a little bit and just go over some observations as the regulator. You know, through the, and perhaps some of this is familiar with many of you, through the 1990s, you know, and since the inception of pipeline safety regulations, our oversight was based on a code that was primarily prescriptive and had a set of interdependent requirements in there with requirements such as check cathodic protection periodically, inspect valves, inspect regulators, and the like. We transformed from that in the early 2000s to integrity management that put an pipeline oversight program of risk management, requiring operators to apply risk management principles to managing pipeline safety. I'll get into that in a little bit more detail later. And here's a key point I want to bring up, and you're probably familiar with this, is in the aftermath of a failure, a pipeline failure, there's often a call for more prescriptive regulations to address that cause, the cause of that accident. And certainly we do that. It's important to us to learn from accidents. But I contend to you that, you know, just responding to the most recent accident is not the optimal solution to ensure pipeline safety. Again, it's important that we learn from accidents and we apply those learnings, but we need to look beyond that and really focus on preventing the next accident. And also, you know, and I know there'll be some discussion later on performance-based regulations and the efficacy of those, but we need to, you know, acknowledge that there's a one-size-fits-all approach really is not necessarily appropriate for pipeline safety, recognizing that the operating environment varies greatly depending on where the pipeline is located. So to develop a one-size-fits-all approach is not the optimal solution, but to develop requirements that require the analysis, assessment, and of risk, and to apply preventive and mitigative measures to address risk on pipelines. That's been the whole basis of our integrity management program that we implemented in the early 2000s. So we are seeking as a regulator to provide that right mix of prescription and of performance-based standards that are contained in integrity management. In the aftermath of accidents, we do address those, and we do dial in the prescription a bit just to tighten up the, necessarily to tighten up the expectations that are contained in the code. You know, when we issued the initial IMP rules back in the early 2000s, they were a major improvement and had operators addressing risk, but they're still evolving. We've learned a lot from that, and we need to move forward. And that's why in two principal rules that we have on the table right now, the hazardous liquid rule and the gas transmission rule, address key learnings from San Bruno and from Marshall, Michigan, and will invoke improvements to the integrity management program, in addition to some other issues that I'll get into in a moment. Shifting gears yet again, and on the theme of transformation, the environment we operate in has transformed greatly since about 2010, when there was a perfect storm of incidents, and then while the shale gas revolution and oil revolution was happening, the subject of pipeline safety has really increased in stature nationwide as a key piece of infrastructure to deliver a vital commodity to end users. We need to transform our agency beyond that agency that was created in 1968 and that was relatively small to an agency that's better able to respond to this environment that we're operating in. So really the initiatives that we have going on right now directly improve how we operate in response to this environment that's changed. We need to evolve. Necessarily, any thriving organization needs to evolve and adapt to the changing environment, and that's exactly what we're doing, and why we came up with what the administrator described earlier as our strategic framework and the building blocks restructuring for success of the agency. There are 5 key goals within that structure, and again, it was, I believe she had mentioned it, we had developed this through a series of off-site executive meetings over the last several months that resulted in what you see here today. The 3 individual goals and 2 cross-cutting goals. Certainly our participation today or this week in the Pipeline Safety Trust is a big part of our public outreach and establishing and public trust. And it's all underpinned by what we call the Thrive values, and incidentally, those were developed by an employee survey, participation by all PHMSA employees as far as the values that are important to us, every employee. So trust, honesty, respect, integrity, valuing people, and effective communications. As far as 4 key initiatives, I think these have been alluded to, but there are 4 key areas that we are focusing on. One was the organizational assessment that we conducted earlier this year and applying the learnings from that. A data assessment strategy, agency safety action plan, and the SMS framework. As you can see, SMS is a key goal for us or initiative for us. We are all in on that initiative and see it as a part of an element going forward of that's very necessary for pipeline safety, in addition to our traditional regulatory framework. I would also add that, as far as what this means for me, a couple of areas and how it might impact you, a couple of areas that I see this will directly impact us is one on the area of regulatory impact analysis on all of our rulemakings. It's the cost benefit we do as we go into rulemaking. We are building our capability to do economic analysis through this initiative. Our data assessment strategy is incredibly important. We collected a lot of data. We're a data crunching monster, collecting monster. We eat a lot of data. We need to analyze it better, so that's a huge focus for us there. We need to be able to tell you, okay, integrity management is working and this is why it's working. We know it's working, but our data is really not the best it can be, but that's just one example that I see as we go forward with our data strategy to improve how we measure our performance and your performance. Let me shift gears yet again, and the administrator had gone through this, and I'll go through it rather quickly, but I'd be glad to answer any questions as we go forward too. But we reauthorized this year. We were very happy about that. The President signed the bill in the law on June 22nd. We did receive 19 new mandates in that act. 2 of note I'll mention up front are the Emergency Order Authority, which we recently issued the interim final rule on, and then underground natural gas storage that we are working on steadily that we hope to publish before the end of the year. So a lot of work was done in that area and continues to be done. The EO Authority, you may know, many of you may recall, we do have the authority to issue specific orders to a specific operator in the aftermath of a failure. The EO Authority basically gives us the ability to issue an order to the industry to take action on a certain safety issue that we deem is urgent. There are certain controls built into the statute that we will obviously work with different stakeholders as we go to such a measure. And then underground natural or gas storage, certainly we don't regulate that area. We have the authority, but with the issuance of a rule later this year, we will actually be regulating that area, which is currently regulated by various states. Here are really the number of other mandates that are listed there. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I'd certainly be glad on the Q&A to talk about them because I'm familiar with each of them, and we have a plan of action for all of these or game plan to address them. Small-scale LNG certainly was already been mentioned. That's an area that we're in the early stages of rulemaking. Let's see, State Advisory Committee makeup. That gives us a little flexibility to consider a variety of state employees for advisory committees, not just state commissioners. Of note, there are two right there in a row, nationwide integrated database study. If you go to our website today, you look at incident data, it's a national picture of incidents, state, federal oversight, all pipeline incidents. If you go to that same website and you look for enforcement data, it's only federal enforcement data. This initiative really will look to increase or or study how we can better capture data that will give the full picture of pipeline safety that goes on out there. So that's a study we'll be doing. And then the next one, the information sharing system that the administrator referred to earlier, that is a group that we're standing up. We'll be issuing a notice to solicit membership before too long to stand up a working group that will consider the efficacy of information sharing systems out there. And there's interest of time, I'll move forward. Let's see, is there other ones? Well, certainly natural gas leak reporting. Let me just touch on a couple more before I move on. There's operators currently report on the distribution side of things, the lost and unaccounted for gas number that's issued or sent to us as a percentage every year, but we're doing a study or have started a study on what is the makeup of that and what other data could we or should we collect that will give a better idea of what part of that is leakage versus meter accuracy type issues. And then the other mandate related to state policies on natural gas leaks. That's just a study looking at the various state programs for replacement of pipe and updating of aging infrastructure. We issued final rules in the last year on excavation damage. The administrator already covered that, and excess flow valves for multifamily. And then we have the interim final rule on emergency orders. Teed up next are the hazardous liquid rule, which we expect to issue by the end of the year, or we hope to, and then the underground natural gas storage that we hope to issue before the end of the year as well. The current rules on deck, plastic pipe, which is really of note for the distribution industry, that will be a final rule that we will issue in the coming months. And then the OQ cost recovery, incident notification, and other updates. Of note, really, an operator qualification is we are expanding that to construction, whereas currently it only applied to maintenance operations. And then incident notification addresses one of the mandates of the 2011 Act that requires reporting of an incident within 1 hour of confirmed discovery. Natural gas transmission rule and gathering rule, I think many are familiar with, that we are teeing up an advisory committee meeting on December 7th and 8th to address the first part of that rule. And then rules under development, we have the valve and rupture detection rule that will look at valve automation and also rupture detection. This is a detail of what was proposed in the liquid rule that we are working to finalize. Improvements to the integrity management part of the regulation. Of note is we're expanding leak detection requirements beyond just HCAs to all pipelines. The current rule only requires leak detection systems for HCAs or high consequence areas. The gas transmission rule, again, due to the complexity of this rule and the length of it, we're looking at multiple advisory committee meetings. Again, the first one in December. And of note here is addressing the grandfather clause as far as pipe that was not tested when code, or it was not subjected to a pressure test when codes were developed in 1970. And that, of course, was an issue that came out of the San Bruno failure. Lastly, I would just like to end up, and the theme I spoke of was moving beyond the responding to the last accident and moving forward toward preventing the next accident. We see safety management systems as a key initiative going forward that can help in this regard. You know, in looking at the incidents that happen out there, and we do see all of them, the common thread in all of them is an element of systems and organization type issues where information perhaps was not transferred between groups within a company. SMS is a way to manage systems and to manage pipeline safety. And the pipeline industry is really a Johnny-come-lately to that, to safety management systems. It's been applied for years successfully in aviation, in the healthcare industry, and other industries. It fits nicely into the pipeline safety area. We see that initially we are promoting it for really voluntary use, but down the road we will see, we could perhaps regulate it in the future, but right now it's really, we're using the carrot rather than the stick as far as our promotion of SMS. And that really wraps it up, just with this little graphic here. Just, you know, appreciate the participation in this conference. You know, we value our partnership with the Pipeline Safety Trust and with each one of you, and we all have a piece of the pie when it comes to pipeline safety. So, anyway, thank you very much.